Is the INOV8 Trailfly Pro one of the most anticipated trail running shoes of 2026? No, I do not think so, but I'm gonna tell you why right now. Today's run is coming at you from Boise, Idaho, US of A. INOV8 is, of course, based out of the UK, built and designed to handle that highlands / fell running, muddy, boggy type of terrain. That's not the situation that I'm dealing with out here today. Certainly, we do have that kind of stuff more so in the eastern parts of the US. But out here in the American West, we're generally dealing with a lot more dry conditions, higher rocky mountain terrain, not always that steady, boggy stuff and deep mud. All that is to say that INOV8 has kind of fallen off my radar, to be honest, in recent years. As far as this side of the pond, again, I am stating my biases up front here. INOV8 has not been an exciting brand. It's not a shoe that I see on the trail very often or at all. At least from my perspective, it feels like their model lineup has kind of sort of stagnated a little bit. Nothing, again, really exciting or catching my eye. And coming back to my intro there, definitely nothing that I would call the most anticipated shoe, because I just haven't had that feeling about the brand as a whole recently. But that is all going to change now with the all-new Trailfly Pro here. You've got a brand new PowerFlow Elite midsole here, super critical TPEE measured stack. I've got at 34.28, 6 mil drop. On top of that Elite midsole compound, you also have a new insole here, which is notable for INOV8. You've got a Boomerang light insole, which is also super critical TPEE. INOV8 is very precise with their measurements. They spec 4 mil on the insole depth, which is very nice. And that 34.28 that I measured does exactly match up with their specified stack height. All right, drum roll please here. 34.28 underfoot. That's pretty moderate in the mid-range, not quite max stack, but healthy for most of your daily running and racing needs. What if I told you that this was now one of the lightest weight trail running shoes on the market today? Yes, in fact, this Trailfly Pro in my US 10 EU43 weighs in at 8.4 ounces, 239 grams. Yes, you heard that correctly. At this stack height, with this midsole foam, this type of energy underfoot, we're going to talk about that. At that weight, it is comparable to trail super shoes, perhaps the lightest of them all. Even the Norda 005, clearly a one-to-one competitor here. Now that is just astonishing coming from a brand like INOV8. For me, running primarily out here in the American West, I have been able to try out some of their recent models, Trailfly V2 and also previous version of the Trailfly Zero, and they were just kind of heavy-ish, not real energetic underfoot, but primarily I had a lot of problems with the fit. INOV8 has come up with a brand new last here. They're calling it NATURALFIT. It is still anatomically oriented. It's definitely wide and spacious across the toe box. Plenty of room for the toes to splay. Similar to Topo / ultra level room here, but primarily about the last. I think they've changed the orientation of it. I'm not just talking about the anatomical fit, because they have that in other models. It just feels like my foot is oriented more straight inside of the shoe. I don't feel like I'm kind of angling off to the lateral side, which is something I definitely felt in all their other models. Combine that, what I feel is a better foot orientation, with supreme midfoot hold here. I think they really did a good job here dialing in that midfoot hold, something you want to have when you do go with that anatomical toe box. There's just a lot of space up front for the front of the foot to potentially move around and even slide forwards and backwards, which I don't get at all with this model. Both the midfoot and the heel hold of this shoe are completely dialed. I'm just loving the way I feel totally secure. The shoe feels just strapped or wrapped around my foot like a glove, and that is certainly aided by the incredible amount of flex in this shoe. Kind of just rolling along this lead-in part here. I'm gonna do a quick stop to look at the fit and sizing because I want to talk about the ride and feel on the run once I get into steeper ups and downs. But that being said, before I get a little higher up, a little twisty turnier, a little rockier, I do have to say I've been reaching for this shoe quite a lot for my kind of daily easy-ish lower foothills runs. Smooth kind of sandy terrain, nothing technical, maybe small parts, but mostly rolling up and down, and this shoe just feels equally comfortable in that non-technical terrain. The 8.4 ounces feels incredibly light. The flex and natural feel underfoot, I feel, is just a perfect match for all kinds of everyday training miles across all different terrain. I'm gonna try to do this close up in the shade here. It's gonna get to 100 today, so I wanna save myself some sun exposure. Quite a wide forefoot here. Today is actually the first run where I really tried to tighten down, at least from this row up. I was previously just, they have nice notch laces here, by the way. I was previously just kind of like snugging them up at the top and leaving this a little bit loose, and that is something you can certainly do. You could, with these notched laces, they really kind of grab in the eyelid holes, especially since the midfoot hold is so good here. So you could, I think, vary the fit pretty well from the bottom of the shoe to the top. But today, being that I'm about to get into some steeper ups and downs, I tightened these a little bit more because I am going with this thinner sock here. This is a Sidus T-free sock here, so the big toe is free here. You can certainly go, and I have run in Injinji lightweight socks here. You could also go with a midweight or a creeper sock if you have a narrow foot, if you needed to fill up a little bit of space here. I'm kind of borderline there. I don't like to wear one of those thicker toe socks with a lightweight shoe like this because I feel like it throws off the feel of the shoe. Like, it's kind of overbearing to have a thick sock inside a very lightweight shoe, especially with a lot of ground feel. So this T-free one is perfect because with this natural toe box, you do have a lot of room for toe splay, and just being able to have the big toe free, it just kind of feels really nice in this shoe. Again, those Injinji Run lightweight ones, those also worked well, but kind of tightening this down at this bottom section here, you can see in my US 10 EU43 here, got a touch of bunching here, but this is not a lot. This is kind of normal. 43 seems a little low relative to a US 10, so maybe think about that. I'm sure this brand is more well known on the other side of the pond, so you would be used to that EU sizing. But US 10 typically would be a little higher on the EU scale in other brands, but that's no big deal. The midfoot lockdown is just fantastic. I feel totally dialed. The arch contour is pleasantly neutral here. I don't feel anything pressing up, certainly on the edge at all, which a lot of times when you have arch contouring, it'll be oriented on the inside edge there, and I don't get that in here. I kind of feel nice rounded area, probably directly under here, the middle of the foot, but it is very slight. It's just a natural feel underfoot. The 6mm drop is noticeable, I think. It feels like this area of the heel is nice and solid, like when you're running downhill and landing on that area, you have a big kind of chunk to land on, and then it lets you feel it out with your forefoot as you're going down that descent. Coming back to the natural fit last, which they said they have adjusted, there's room on the big toe side here, but in those other models, especially that blue Trailfly V2, I did another video where I was hiking in it while I was injured, and for one thing, they have a weird heel setup in that the heel is very low in that model and some other models, and have a band that wraps around, and it just feels like it presses or pulls, like the way they want to hold your foot is by like pulling it in from the rear lower heel, which I find is really weird, and I've never felt that in any other shoe. If you felt that before, this shoe is absolutely not like that. This is like a normal heel here, kind of wrapping and holding the heel in from the sides and over the top of the heel bone, not like directly on the back of the heel bone. So just something to consider if you also had that in your other shoe. Also in the V2, I felt like my feet were angled out inside the shoe, like I was pressed up into this side of the shoe, and I had like a crazy amount of space on the big toe side, which was also something that was really weird to me and I never experienced in any other shoe. I have the Trailfly V2 in a US 10.5. I also have this Bear XF training shoes, also in a 10.5, and these are a 10, and these fit perfectly. They actually sent me like 3 pairs of shoes in the winter to try and test in 9.5, which is my true to size, and I couldn't even get my feet in them. Like normally a 9.5 may be tight or may be fine because I think that's my true to size, but I couldn't even like get my feet inside of the shoes. So I went fully up to a 10.5 in those blue V2s, and those fit equally to this in a 10. So I'm not sure, you may want to be careful with your sizing, or hopefully you have a chance to try them on. US 10 is my like upper end of my 9.5, 10 range, and I feel quite comfortable just checking toe box here. I don't have a full thumbs width. I think with this amount of toe box space all around the sides and just spaciousness overall for the forefoot to spread out, I wouldn't want to go too large in front. This is not certainly a max stack shoe. I don't think I would consider it for a super long ultra. That may vary depending on what you're used to, what style of shoe that you're used to. I would say going all the way up to, say, a mid-range ultra, but I don't have a full thumbs. It's just short, maybe 2/3 again, so that is perfect and right on point in the US 10. And with the great midfoot hold, solid lockdown in the heel and everything, I never feel like I'm sliding forward. So even though I'm not at a full thumbs width, it's completely fine because, again, I'm not moving at all. A lot of times you'll size up to allow for kind of like sliding or toe bumping, which I'm not getting at all in this shoe. Last thing to note, I want to talk about breathability, maybe at the end of this run because it's going to be really hot. These are kind of like sweat stains. I don't think this is a ripstop mesh upper here, single layer, no liner on the interior, but it's not the most breathable. I'm going to come back to this by the end of this run, but these are kind of like sweat stains where my feet are getting hot and it's kind of like permeating through and picking up dirt. So maybe we'll get, I hear water, so we might get some water crossings too, so we will also check on that. So this is a full TPEE midsole underfoot here. No plates, no shanks, no stiffening elements at all, just pure foam, plus of course Boomerang light insole TPEE, super critical on top of it. It feels incredibly bouncy, incredibly energetic, and at the same time stable, I think, due to the anatomical fit of the shoe, the anatomical natural design of the flex underfoot. I just feel like I'm able to grab the ground with the ball of my foot and the forefoot, no problems at all. I think this is something truly unique from INOV8 here, coming back to that combination of the midsole flex and ground feel underfoot. That's not a combination that is easily achieved. Typically with these natural style toe boxes designed here, you'll get that flex, you'll get that space, sometimes nice secure lockdown, but not typically this type of energy underfoot, this type of bounciness at the same time as having that flexiness. Really incredible and unique here from the Trailfly Pro. I am gonna hit all of these streams on the way back. Test the water after the climb up and down. Climbing, or any type of incline for that matter, feels especially good with that flex underfoot. They've got these MetaFlex grooves between the forefoot and the toes. And as soon as you lean into any type of grade, the steeper it is, the more apparent it is. You can really feel how the shoe flexes at the toes, and you could just easily lean into that hill, get that flex going, and really almost like dig in with your forefoot and toes. The grip and traction in steeper grades, and certainly if it is wet and muddy or loose and rocky, it can be great with this shoe. You of course have INOV8's patented graphene infused G-grip outsole underfoot, 4mm lugs, nice kind of bitey chevron design here, angled for braking in the rear and traction grabbing, as I mentioned, up at the forefoot. INOV8 does of course make some of the best outsoles in the trail running game, of course going back to their UK fell running heritage. The G-grip here, graphene infused, always super durable, long lasting, but this one here feels a little soft. Maybe it's just in combination with the flex of the shoe overall, but the compound itself seems a little bit soft and tacky-ish, like as if the lugs themselves can kind of contour a little bit more than your typical, say, harder rubber, firmer lugs. That just adds to the grabby feel that you get with the flex of the shoe, and again, the wide toe box allowing for toe splay and feel under the toes. Again, this type of mixed rolling, I'm kind of rolling slightly up continuously here, but twisty turny, mix of loose stuff underfoot, rocks, pine cones, dipping and diving here and there. This Trailfly Pro handles it impeccably. Just the feel underfoot is incredible. I'm loving this shoe. The TPEE midsole feels so responsive, so reactive, especially under the forefoot, given that I have that excellent midfoot lockdown, total foot security. I feel like I'm able to just put my feet wherever they need to be, and I grab on the ground. I've got traction, I've got energy return, no foot sliding, which is not always the case when you have a wider toe box shoe like this. And of course, 8.4 ounces. That certainly makes it easier to throw the feet around when you need to. This is the problem with reviewing a shoe on the run that is so much fun to run in. I should be taking it a little bit easier than I am today. I'm supposed to do a long run tomorrow, but just so fun to run in the shoe, especially on this route I picked today. All right, getting into climby part here. Again, love the flex on the climbs, love the lightweight, love the traction underfoot. So easy to just lean forward and pick your way uphill. Pop one shoe off here. I want to highlight a few features that are in line with INOV8's natural performance philosophy here, as they're calling it. Let's talk about MetaFlex first. This is that groove here, and I guess the grooves that are built throughout the midsole, you could see they are, I guess, scientifically oriented pods of rubber here. And this one specifically, and probably this one once you get into the front of your toe off at very steep sections, look at the flex that this allows here. That is just fantastic when you're climbing, and also when you're running twisty turny sections. It does allow your foot to articulate over the ground without kind of like twisting the rest of your foot. This split down the middle here allows a very smooth landing on the lateral side and allows you to kind of more easily roll into that medial side. I will say, if you're sizing these shoes, if you get a chance to try them on, this part should be oriented right under the center of the ball of your foot, below the big toe. And that's probably a good way to key in on sizing here. This is the base of my big toe, like I guess this part right here. You can see my socks here, these are great. So this part of your foot right here, it's right here, and you want to orient that, kind of center that right in here. If you wear this shoe a little too tight, a little too small, again, I always think people are running their shoes a little too small. If this part of your foot, like right here, should be under this part right here, you may find yourself a little far forward if your sizing is too small, and then you'll perhaps be on the front edge of that section here, and then you might feel, I would imagine, some uncomfortability because you're not really flexing over the center of this little pad here. Again, MetaFlex here, this is great. You can see the overall flex of this shoe. This is one of the most flexible shoes out there. Easy flex in all directions. They do have this section connected on the lateral side, so that does give it a bit of torsion and keeps it from being overly loose, I would say, but this is a pretty flexy and loose feeling shoe. Another aspect is they have an offset heel counter here. So this is based on the natural orientation of your ankle bone. Your inside ankle bone on the medial side is oriented a little bit more forward and higher than your outside ankle bone, which is a little bit lower and further back. So they have designed their heel collar very slightly. You're not going to look at this and notice a drastic difference, but this side is a little bit forward and cut a little higher on this side, and this little opening here is notched a little bit lower and sits a little bit further back. This must be working well because I don't notice it or feel it at all. It feels incredibly comfortable all around. Talked about the midfoot hold, but this rear of the shoe, way better than Trailfly V2, which I've talked about. Heel is well seated and I get no irritation anywhere around any of those ankle collars. So the orientation with that offset heel counter design must be working pretty well. Check this. This is a pretty light heel counter here. I could see kind of the outline of it inside the material there. Pretty flexible. This is, I would say, short of medium stiffness. This allows your foot to move with the shoe and move with the ground underneath. Tongue nicely padded here too. It is non-gusseted, which I think, let me take a look at this one. Looking down, and this happens in the right shoe, not my left. It kind of comes up a little bit. It's not a problem because this upper row is right, pretty well covered from digging into my actual foot here, and the padding comes up to here and up to here, but it just seems to be like this one is like offset a little higher for some reason on my right foot, not my left. So perhaps they could have added a gusset in here, but there is no gusset in there. It's not an issue, but just you can see how that works out there. Coming back to the material here, blow test. I can hardly blow air through this material, and if you look on the inside, it's a single layer mesh. Again, no lining in the toe box. Rip stop, feels super lightweight, even on the side area here. Like I can almost not get air through here. So you're not gonna have airflow moving in and out of this shoe for sure. I'm gonna come back the exact same way that I came up because I do want to go through all those water crossings, and I like the rockiness for testing protection on the downhill. We'll talk about that on the way down, but breathability is certainly not a strong point of this shoe. I don't know if that's because they're based in the UK or what, but would have liked to see a little bit more of an open weave. Not fully open, but at least allow some breathability in here. I typically don't run hot in terms of my feet sweating inside shoes, but I know some runners do, so that is something to be aware of. It will be excellent in cold weather, obviously. Here we go, back downhill. Couple of rocky sections near the top should get a good feel for protection. I talked about ground feel, flex a lot on the way up here, and along with that comes perhaps lesser protection on rockier descents. You can see me kind of picking my way through this rocky section, not too much in the way of being able to maneuver around a lot of these rocks, pretty well scattered underfoot, unavoidable. You've got 34, 28 underfoot again, 28 up front, 4 mil lugs plus the outsole base insole, 4 millimeters on the Boomerang Light. Not a ton of protection underfoot. Of course, no plate in the mix. You do feel and notice your feet articulating and kind of contouring around rockier stuff. Certainly, as I'm working my way down here, I am noticing that. There are times when you can crash down on that nice heel crash pad, but generally speaking, you do want to be a little bit more nimble, a little bit more agile if you're kind of moving at speed through rockier sections, especially on the way down. Obviously, sharp rocks could find their way into that Metaflex groove and miss those outsole pads entirely. Also, the foam being quite energetic, and that means quite soft underfoot. You're going to get a lot of contour, so you do want to minimize the amount of direct hits that you take. The good thing is, with the lightweight aspect of this shoe and the maneuverable aspect, probably more importantly, or maybe even most importantly, the fact that it is so secure. I'm kind of jumping around here, throwing my feet in all different directions, and I'm not sliding forward at all. Just a hair in perhaps the most steepest terrain, but I do not feel my toes jamming into the front bumper, even at about 2/3 thumbs width up front here. Midfoot is doing well to strap the middle of my foot kind of down into that neutral arch area. And it can be quite fun to kind of pick your way around rather than just indiscriminately plowing through stuff. Perhaps the offset heel counter also an advantage when you're twisting and turning on these kind of downhills. Again, not noticeable on the run, so I count that as a good thing. My heel ankle area doesn't feel like it's being thrown any way that it doesn't want to go. All right, let's try slowly here because I mentioned limited breathability. Water is kind of slowly absorbing in here. It is not rushing in, I would say. It is absorbing through that material. So that is a little bit interesting. It's not on the level of Gore-Tex or any type of proprietary waterproof material, but it's not flowing into the shoe as it would with, say, an open mesh. So that is something to consider depending on the terrain that you will be working in. If you're crossing streams to this degree, perhaps not going ankle or knee or hip deep, whatever, perhaps this could be good to keep a lot of water out. Yeah, that was just a couple seconds there, and my socks dampened up a little, but there's no water sloshing around here. It actually feels, I think my right foot was a little deeper, feels a little damper on the bottom of my sock there, but my left foot, it doesn't feel wet at all on the bottom of my sock on top of the insole. So if you were only worried about minor splashing, this could be good to keep your feet relatively dry if something kind of to this degree of depth was unavoidable. But there's a few more water crossings up ahead, and I'm gonna go deeper than this up ahead. I'll see how this feels for a little while, then I'll soak them a little more and see how well it comes out. Interested to see how well the water is able to work its way out. There's no drainage holes or anything in the bottom of the shoe. Not something you often see in trail shoes, but we'll see. Definitely got the full soak going on there. Also a little bit of wet rock testing. Slightly nervous, but I think the feel of the contouring of the shoe overall gave me let's say high confidence that I was gonna kind of wrap around the edge of that rock and grab pretty well, and it did. So wet rock grip, at least for my purposes, and I definitely would not want to try that too much, but nice to know that it is quite grabby. Did get a few pebbles and little river rock stuff inside of my shoes there. There's no fancy integrated ankle gaiter here. Not a crazy tight wrap around that offset ankle collar either. There's no pressure around the ankle bones and the edge of that collar, so that's a good thing. But perhaps stream crossings like that, you'll get some stuff in, so use gaiters when appropriate. I hope this doesn't bias my wet testing. Still in the shade here, but when I do pop out, it's gonna be in the 90-degree range plus, and this actually feels pretty refreshing inside the shoes right now. The water does. I did just go ahead and clock a lap there. I'm gonna try to avoid the crossings the rest of the way and time it out, see how they feel after, say, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever. In the meantime, final thoughts here on the Trailfly Pro. Perhaps for me, not the most anticipated shoe of 2026, but rest assured, the next INOV8 trail models that do come out, we'll see later 2026 and certainly 2027 going forward, they will be most anticipated in my book based on this Trailfly Pro. I think this shoe does have big potential to perhaps reframe whatever conceptions or misconceptions you may have about the INOV8 brand. Again, perhaps well-founded or not, maybe depending on the geography where you're located and the terrain that you're running in. It also has the potential to reframe or rewrite what is possible for this type of lightweight running shoe in the natural performance category. Again, going back to that aspect of having that natural fit, anatomical last, wide toe box while being secure, which is a benchmark that other shoes have certainly hit so far. But I'm not sure if they've quite hit this level of runnability, this level of bounce, reactivity, and midsole performance in combination with that natural style setup. That's a huge differentiating factor for the Trailfly Pro here. You've probably heard me talk about in my videos. I like forefoot space, don't like being squeezed. I often like a natural fit in a shoe. I've run in ultras, particularly like some of the Topo models, and just generally performance-oriented models that give you comfortable space in the forefoot and the toes. I feel like that's essential and necessary for trail running, and they've built this shoe on those principles. If those natural anatomical aspects are features that you look for in a trail running shoe, you do not have to sacrifice performance if you're running in the Trailfly Pro, and that is a huge differentiating factor. A lot of those models, a lot of those brands, you're not necessarily getting tip of the spear performance and or midsole foams. Here, you're kind of getting everything with no sacrifices. Now, I don't do ranking or rating or scoring in my shoe reviews, but let's just say that this is in the range of 2 thumbs up or 5 stars, whatever you want to call it. You can book it now. This is going to be on my list of top trail shoes of 2026. I've loved running in this shoe and the mix of terrain I've covered so far in it. There's a few caveats. Again, stay tuned to check on the wet test, maybe in a few minutes here. Breathability for sure is one. Certainly going to be better in cold weather shoe, which can be advantageous, certainly if you're in the UK or places like that, or if you have cold feet. But that's an aspect that could be improved. And ground protection, I would not like to call that kind of a downside, but it's just the nature of the shoe. 3428, super flexy, super bouncy. You're not going to have the protection of a max stack super shoe, but I think that's kind of self-explanatory. I really can't knock the shoe for that, but just something to be aware of if you're thinking of this in that super shoe range. It's in that lightweight, energetic ground feel super shoe style. I was going to give it a full 15 minutes, but feeling pretty good right now. 13 minutes after that deeper water crossing. Drainability is pretty good, better than I expected. In fact, the water seems to be migrating from my socks. My socks are damp, of course. It's only 13 minutes post full submersion, but that ripstop outer material does seem to be migrating the water from my socks. I don't feel anything sloshing underneath my foot, which is always a sign that a shoe is holding water, not evacuating it, or perhaps trapping it under the foot. I don't feel that at all, and I actually didn't even feel that after maybe even a minute or two after going full shin deep there. This is a strobe-less design here. Again, you've got the Boomerang light insole, TPEE midsole there. There's a light type of fabric material on top of the insole. But again, I think the key is with the strobe-less design, you don't have any kind of foamy or perhaps fabricy strobel material kind of holding just a little bit or even trapping material above the midsole and underneath the insole. Really kind of squishes out through there, and really, aside from my socks being damp, which is 100% normal, I do not feel excessive or any sloshing inside the shoe at all. So breathability, perhaps not great, but drainability, good. Thank you for tuning in once again to Humble Running. I've got product affiliate links down in the description below. Also have a link to the product list for this specific video on my Rendezvous profile. Everything that you see in my kit here. Got the Bolet shades, K-Lost vest here, Rourke button-down shirt, John G multi-shorts here, and of course Sidus T-free socks, which I talked about earlier. I've got my entire kit compiled in one handy list on Rendezvous, and the link is again in the description below. So if you have questions or ever want to check out what I'm wearing in the video, what I'm using, gear, apparel, shoes, nutrition, all that stuff, I'm going to be setting up those Rendezvous lists going forward. So you can just pop in the description, check out the list, and get that information you need if you want to be rocking some of the stuff that I am out here in my videos. Of course, check out the website, www.humblerunning.com. Sign up for my newsletter there. I send out roundups bi-weekly, links to all the videos, and also articles, stuff I have in for test, just in case the algorithm for some reason does not show you something. You won't miss anything if you do sign up for my newsletter. I also have a paid membership option there. Don't talk about that too often, but if you do have more detailed questions about shoes, gear, apparel, racing, nutrition, anything that you think I might be able to help you with, if you want to ensure that I am able to get to and answer your questions, I try to do my best in the comments, but sometimes things just disappear or float away based on when the notifications are put in front of me. But I do make a point to check my Substack inbox. So if you do sign up as a paid member, I will answer any questions that you have related to the stuff I cover without any delay. So that is the primary feature, and also get early access to these videos whenever possible, whenever I could get them teed up ahead of release. So that's another cool feature there. But of course, all that is optional. I'm just happy that you're tuned in right now, and in fact that you're tuned in to the end here. I just want to point out those are some other ways that you can support Humble Running, and I of course do appreciate it. So I will see you next time out on the trails. A lot of great stuff on the way.